So let's explore for a moment the development and underdevelopment of the no that can happen. In my many years as a psychoanalyst and psychologist, I've understood the power of the no in everyday ways and in the wide, life-determining, often traumatic ways of development. How does this knowing no get ruptured? Most commonly it begins in the family. The 2-year-old's no's are difficult for most of us as adults and parents to manage. It makes life harder and usually messier. Most of us do not know how to provide the freedom for the child to find and even exhaust themselves with the no's so that they can naturally move into the yeses without that impulse to try to control and demand and even squelch, sometimes even frighten the child into submission. Then the knowing no is forced underground. In time, in an effort to feel accepted and loved by their parents, the child may even lose contact with their knowing no and stop feeling and trusting their own experience. To say no becomes too scary. To say no is too great of a risk in that growing life. The denied no can even lead to the denial of reality. Imagine, if you will, the inability to say no as illustrated in the following narrative. A family sits at the dinner table, and Dad, having too much to drink, falls off his chair. The child responds with a frightened jolt and is told by his mother, "Just eat your supper, just ignore him, he's okay." The child stares wide-eyed in both fear and real concern, to which Dad has now picked himself up off the floor, looks back at the child and snaps, "What are you looking at?" In time, the child may even be conditioned not to notice such bizarre behavior. And if he does notice such behavior, he'll learn not to respond or to comment, pretending as if nothing has happened. And eventually, in order to emotionally survive, he may grow numb, unable to feel anything in response to the startling reality he has observed. Thus, the family can be a breeding ground for the ruptured no that in time can lead to the loss of one's own actual perceptions, feelings, assuming an adaptive self, a false self, to adjust to an environment where a healthy no that says, "I see, I feel, I can name my experience, and I can find ways of expressing the truth of myself," is no longer possible. The old adage, "Children should be seen and not heard," thus gives way to "the good child should not even be seen," emotionally. Parents afraid of the true knowing no can limit the child's development, and the entire lifespan is marked by the challenge to feel safe enough to say that necessary no. And yet, learning the knowing no does not begin and end in childhood. As people of faith, we are called to justice making. We live the fine line of learning the increasingly complex no's throughout the lifespan. Listen to the words again of E.E. Cummings when he said these harsh and sarcastic no's in an attempt to find the true, authentic voice for himself. "If I were I would not say those pleasant things I say. I would not smile and nod my head when you say no. I would not bear, repress, restrain my disagreement with you, but I would argue every point to puncture. I would express the real self. And then I would smile, if I were I." How many of us have learned to sacrifice the real self and take care of the parents or spouses or friends or society's demands in exchange for experience of feeling loved and accepted? Is it any wonder that we become the silent majority? So we need the knowing no, both to stay connected to our real selves and the necessary no's from parents and society that can teach boundaries, right from wrong, safety, common sense, and good moral guidance. All of that gives way to the positive boundaries of self and good self-discipline. We all know that one of the greatest predictors of success is the ability to delay gratification, and that capacity is made possible in the knowing no. Without the no, the yes never comes to fruition, and the self may not be forced underground by an over-controlling no, a settling that is never possible in giving oneself to the real religious life. And this search for boundaries and limits and discipline and identity becomes vulnerable and even lost without the knowing no. It was the mature power of no that took Jesus into the temple, to have that family conflict, to be able to stand up and to say no, that grew out of a sense of what was right for his own understanding and the strength of his own personhood. It is the no that forms the bedrock of our sense of self that must be touched for this yes to come forward. We cannot move on to the yes, live the yes as people of faith without the no. But if only the no is lived, and if one is stuck in the search for the no, then yes, the real surrender to the altar of the greater religious life is at risk. A number of years ago, I shared an apartment with a young actress, a dear friend of mine, and Joan would rise early every morning and practice her breathing and vocalization exercises. And one of the first mornings that we were put together in this little apartment at the Southern Appalachian Repertory Theater in North Carolina, I awoke to hear Joan say, "Submit never! Submit never!" I thought, oh my goodness, what's happening in that room? And I got out of bed and I kept hearing this submit never with these deep breaths. And I realized that that simple exercise says a lot about how we learn to say no in our lives. Shall we take a moment with a deep breath and say, submit never? Want to? Take a deep breath. Submit never. Submit never. Submit never. An important exercise, not only for deep breathing and warming up the vocal cords, but knowing there's a time in life to submit